Welcome back to Things That Matter. I'm Gary Sutton alongside of Charlie Giroux, who is running for governor on the Republican ticket here in the state of Pennsylvania. And the things that matter this week that we really want to talk about is a word that probably is used as much as anything here in Pennsylvania and around the nation: conservative. We hear about conservatives and liberals all the time. Well, this week we have the largest group of conservatives anywhere on the planet gathering together down in Orlando, Florida at the CPAC convention. And CPAC, for anybody who doesn't know what that means, is Conservative Political Action Conference. And one of the guys that's been involved in that for a long time and has been at the front of it for a long time is Charlie Giroux. Charlie, great to talk to you this morning.
Good to be with you, Gary, and I'm looking forward to CPAC. It'll be underway as this gets broadcast because we're doing it before we leave. It is the largest gathering of conservatives on the planet. It's bigger than either of the national conventions of the two parties, and they only get together once every 4 years. We get together every year, and it will be headlined by Ron DeSantis, Governor Ron DeSantis starting, and President Donald J. Trump ending.
Talk about how you became a conservative, because I think that's an important thing. A lot of people, I used to kid people. I said, what are you, conservative, liberal? They say, well, I'm conservative. I say, why are you conservative? Well, I listen to Rush Limbaugh. Well, why are you liberal? Well, I hate Republicans. And that would be it. But then you ask the same people, go out and ask people how they're going to pay for their kids' schooling, their education, what they're going to do in terms of buying a new washer next week. They know all those answers. Most people don't know why they're conservative or liberal. Why are you a conservative?
I think the key word for me, beyond freedom and individual liberty, is opportunity. Yeah. Because, as you know, I kind of grew up the hard way, Gary, and opportunity was always at the core. If you could avail yourself of the opportunities that were there, and there were a lot of opportunities, you could do better for yourself. And I saw conservatism as preserving the freedom necessary to make those opportunities work for me or for my friends or for anybody else.
As you define conservatism for people that you talk to, point by point, what are they for you? Just looking at it as you look down the line and say, okay, here's what the definition is.
Well, the most important part is individual liberty, freedom. That's at the core of conservative thought. It's really, if you want to get into the definitional stuff, and a lot of lecture I used to teach government, as you know, it's classic liberalism, the conservatism that I espouse. It's the conservative philosophy of Ronald Reagan, for example, for whom I worked for many years, and it really works. That's the key, Gary.
And the idea that you have freedom with responsibility. The idea that it's not just freedom, but it's freedom with responsibility and kind of obeying the rules, and yet at the same time understanding that you have the wisdom to make the kinds of decisions for yourself that are really organic and what really drives this country.
Well, it is the antithesis of this experts know better, big government knows better. Liberals today, Gary, the progressive left, tend to see government as the save-all for everything. They view life as a series of problems to be solved by big government and experts who know better than we do. Conservatism is exactly the opposite. It's individualism. It's the ability to do better for yourself and your family and your loved ones. And as a result, the collective society does better because each of the component pieces are doing better, and there's prosperity for all.
I don't know if we talk about it in this much depth every day in our society, but the whole idea of conservatism, too, has a respect for the idea that the family was the original form of government, and that all government should spring forth from the family, should be an extension of the family, and an extension, more importantly, of the individual in the long run. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the family unit really is at the core,
right.
And the breakdown of the American family is one of the tragedies of recent days in our society. So you are correct. The family unit is at the center, and the opportunity to have decisions made for one's family, what's best for them, what will help them achieve their hopes and dreams and goals and ambitions, is really the key to a successful society.
When you look at conservatism over the years, has it changed or evolved in your lifetime? You spent a lot of years with Ronald Reagan and others. How has it changed or evolved?
I think where I've seen it change, Gary, is it's much more populist today than it once was. It's much more blue collar. It's much more gritty. It's much more what I grew up with, the neighborhoods where I lived.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing. I said for a long time that we had to get the Republican Party out of the country clubs and into the union halls and into the American Legion halls and into the places where people really live and work and where it really matters. And I think that that's happened over the course of years. Started with Ronald Reagan in a big way. Donald Trump continued it. And so the Republican Party today is much less silk stocking and much more middle American. I think that's a good thing. And it's not just the Republican Party, but the conservative movement in general. The values that the conservative movement is talking about are the values of middle America.
As you look at the various groups today, we were watching the Democrats fighting with the far left progressives and the so-called moderate people in the middle. Republican Party, same thing, has some of the patriots way far on the right side, and then you've got like more of a mainstream here in the middle. Talk a little bit about the differences among those kinds of groups, particularly in the conservative part, with which you're most interested.
Well, I prefer to think of the things that unite us rather than the things that divide us, Gary. So to talk about the differences between varying degrees and shades of a particular school of thought, to me, is not the way to go. I mean, Ronald Reagan used to say, if you agree with me 80% of the time, you're not my enemy.
Right.
And unfortunately, we try to get into, well, are you the purist? Are you here? Are you here? Are you here? I think the thing that ultimately is most important is what unites us. What are the principles? What are the thoughts? What are the philosophies? What are the policies that bring us together and can allow us to get things done in a really positive way? And so I want to look at, again, individual liberty, personal responsibility, economic opportunity, freedom to pursue those opportunities and to do better, and in so doing to create wealth and prosperity and hopefully happiness for all.
Our word for today is conservative, and the Conservative Political Action Conference going on in Florida as you're watching this. One of the things that people would be surprised by, most of the time people say, oh, conservatives, they're a stodgy old bunch of people. Year in and year out, it is a very young group that comes to Florida and places other that you've had it around the country.
Very young. The median age at CPAC is under 25 years.
Right.
So, I mean, you think about that. It's the under 25 group that's at CPAC, and there are thousands of college students there. And that makes me really happy because that's obviously the future of the country. But there are high school kids there. And what's really so significant about CPAC is they're not just coming there to listen to speakers. That's obviously the top line activity. But they're in training sessions. They're learning how to be the true foot soldiers of democracy. They're learning the skills to be more active and to do more in their communities. And that, I think, is really, really a great thing for the conservative movement. It's something that Matt Schlapp, who's our chairman, introduced a few years ago and has really put on steroids recently. And we've got so many folks that are coming in to learn, to listen, to make new friendships, build new relationships, build networks, et cetera, that are all working for a better country.
As you are a custodian of conservatism for your generation, what are some of the things that you're teaching some of those younger people, people like you are teaching them in some of these workshops and conferences that you're having?
Well, we're teaching them the basic skills of political activism. It's the Conservative Political Action Conference. And so it's political action because education without action doesn't mean very much.
Right.
So to have all the knowledge that anybody could have, but without taking any action as a result, really is a failed model. So we're trying to get folks to learn the basic skills of going door to door, of registering voters, of showing up at public meetings, of running for office, maybe not for president or governor, but for a local school board or a local township commission or a supervisor's position. And folks are doing that. They're getting involved. They're going out from the CPAC conference and doing things in their little pieces of America that make all of us better off for it.
I think one of the things that has been interesting over the years from my vantage point, looking at conservatives juxtaposed again to liberals, there was a time, and you're known as kind of the happy conservative, there was a time where there was a respect for the basic ideas of America, Constitution, moving forward. And while there were two different approaches to it, and I know you've spent time debating people in your career on TV and so forth, but you've always been able to come back and have a smile and maybe even a dinner with somebody afterward. Today, we don't have that same respect. It's like we're talking two different languages many times. How do we get back to having that respect, conservatives and liberals alike, and getting back to where we can talk about things with the idea that at the end we all want the very best for our country or for the state of Pennsylvania?
Well, the old cliche, Gary, is you ought to be able to disagree without being disagreeable.
Right.
And unfortunately today our discourse has become so vitriolic that people get pushed aside, and our society, just in the way we work ordinarily, means that folks don't sit down and break bread.
Right.
You know, you said I've had meals with people that I didn't agree with politically, and I have. And those have been great encounters. And it helps when you can do that to ultimately define what we can find as common ground and make work for everybody. You know, Ronald Reagan, I keep coming back to him, but he's a great role
great
model.
communicator.
And Tip O'Neill used to say it was pistols at dawn and cigars at dusk, because they were able, through all of their differences, ultimately to get together and to make things happen for the country.
You have a lot of young people today who are looking around at the examples of maybe the older generation saying, that doesn't seem to be working too well. That's not a conversation. That's not a good debate. That's something like CPAC. How do you teach them the language of politics in a way where you want people to hear you, not just the people who agree with you, but the people who don't?
Well, I think that you've already identified how you do that. I mean, you chat with them, and the conversations that I have that are the best are late night conversations in some room here or there where people get together and say, let's just have a bull session and discuss these things. And they're really very interested. It's not that they're just, taking up space and having a good time and drinking as much as they can. They're really there to learn. And so the opportunity to share some experiences, the things that you've picked up from a few laps around the track, is really, really good. And they're like sponges. They really drink it in. So that's one of the real values of CPAC, in my judgment, is the opportunity to share some of the things that you've learned along the way and that will be helpful to them in building a better society.
We're talking about the CPAC convention that's happening in Orlando, Florida this week, and it is the largest collection of conservatives around the country, I would dare say around the world.
It is.
When you look at some of the great moments there over the years, and I just, I remember seeing a speech one time by Rush Limbaugh that was incredible about what conservatism was. But I'm sure there have been many times there that you sat back and said, wow, that's a moment. Is there one that stands out in your mind?
I think there are three. One would be Ronald Reagan's first speech at CPAC, which was laying out the manifesto of the conservative movement as only he could do. Two was the Rush Limbaugh speech, which was not only heartfelt, but touched people in ways that even Ronald Reagan couldn't do. I mean, Rush Limbaugh had an ability to really touch people's hearts, not just their minds. And so that speech probably was the best speech ever given at CPAC. And incidentally, we gave his widow a posthumous award for lifetime service to the conservative movement. I was very, very proud and honored to do that. And the third was Donald Trump's speech right before the 2020 election, where he really laid out what his administration had been able to accomplish. It was the one where he hugged the flag when he came out. I think that was really a memorable speech. Enormous crowd. We had to build out bleachers in the back of a ballroom. It looked more like a stadium than a hotel ballroom, because the capacity crowd was overflowing and everybody wanted to be in the room to hear President Trump.
You're running for governor right now. There are a lot of people throwing around terms, would be if you're running for senator or governor here in Pennsylvania, rhinos versus the true Republicans and all those kind of things. We throw a lot of those things around. I know you prefer not to get into the things that divide people, and yet at the same time, one of the things that you hear about a lot now, the pro-Trumpers, the anti-Trumpers, and all those various kinds of stereotypes that we tend to want to throw around and profile people. How do you bring together all those people now into the tent of saying, hey, we're conservative. We kind of all want the same thing. Let's get away from this anti-pro stuff.
And it's been a challenge for the conservative movement since its inception, because we are very individualistic. The left tends to, go with the flow and follow the crowd more than the conservative side. And so it's always been, Gary, a fusion, an ability to bring together people who didn't agree on every single little thing, but get them to unite around some core principles, not personalities, but principles, and then to support candidates who believed in those principles and who could win. Because William F. Buckley always said it had to be the conservative candidate who was most valuable and most electable. And so that, I think, has been the model that has worked. Hasn't always been perfect, hasn't always been pretty, but as I tell folks, you can be a comfortable minority where everybody agrees, but you're this big, or you can be an uncomfortable majority. I prefer to be in the majority.
Talk this year about going to CPAC as the Republican candidate for governor. That's got to be a little different role for you. You're normally there working, I know, and you've been high up in the echelon and making sure that whole thing happens, but now you're going as a candidate also. That's got to be weird.
It is, and I'm the vice chairman of CPAC. As you know, Matt Schlapp, our illustrious chairman, has done so much for the organization and so much for the conference that you can't even detail all the things that he's done to take us to a different level. I've served as his first lieutenant. I check his pulse every morning, Gary. That's my principal job.
I have a feeling you do a little more than that.
But now I'm going as a candidate for governor, and it is a different role. So I'll speak from the main stage. I can't speak as a candidate because our tax status doesn't allow me to speak as a candidate. But I'll talk about freedom. I'll talk about economic opportunity. I'll talk about climbing the ladder of success. And I think those are the things that, whether I'm a candidate or not, are so vitally important, and the things to which I've dedicated so much of my time, energy, and life.
What do you want people to walk away from CPAC saying when it's over each year?
We want them to walk away saying this was the best CPAC ever. We want them to walk away saying I can't wait to get back. But most important, we want them to walk away saying these are the things that I will do in my little corner of the country to make sure that prosperity comes as a result of protecting individual liberty, promoting economic opportunity, believing in individual responsibility, and doing the things that are necessary to keep the great republic that we've been given.
And while you might be in Florida, phone's still going to be on.
Phone will still be on. And it works everywhere, I think. I paid the bill this month, Gary, so we're in good shape.
All right.
And it is 1-717. You don't even need to use the 1. 717-877-8194. And we laugh about it, but it's kind of become my signature at this point. My cell phone number, no candidate for governor that I've ever heard of anywhere has given out a personal cell number, but I've done it all across the state. People say, are you out of your mind? Might be, but so far so good. I haven't gotten any nasty calls. I've gotten a lot of really good calls, and I welcome them. So if folks want to call, 717-877-8194, and you can call while I'm at CPAC.
That's exactly right. And, of course, CPAC will be the kind of the center, ground zero, if you will, this week for politics around the country. You'll be hearing all kinds of stories coming out of that, including the speech by a former President, Donald Trump, on Saturday. Thanks so much for taking time to be with us this week. It's been about conservatism, and it'll continue to be about conservatism for a long time with Charlie Giroux. He's running for governor in the state of Pennsylvania. We'll look forward to seeing you next time on The Things That Matter. I'm Gary Sutton.
Businessman, conservative, patriot, Charlie Giroux for governor.